In the year 1816, a small group of miners claimed to have mined a large amount of gold and silver in the Rocky Mountains. They hid their wealth and swore each other to secrecy so no one would find the stash. For the most part, they kept that secret, but one of the miners, a man called Thomas Beale, wrote a letter pinpointing the exact location of the silver and gold. The only catch was that Beale wrote his letter in code. Eventually, all the members of that mining party died, including Thomas Beale himself. And guess what? No one has ever been able to crack the code. And since that, because none of the miners divulged where the gold was, it has never been found. So in the event that you do want to go looking for that gold, we'll stay behind here and pray for you, and maybe you can tithe 10% if you find it. If that code were easily cracked, I'm sure there would be thousands of miners who would volunteer to go looking for it. In a sense, the last few weeks have surfaced a very human trait that we may not be so proud of. Have you been to the shops over the last 2 months to find out that somebody else had grabbed all of the toilet paper or the soap or even certain foodstuffs? Not everyone knows when they have enough, or cannot distinguish between enough and everything, all. There seems to have been something of this trait in Philip today in the Gospel. Despite all that Jesus has done and said over the last 3 years, it doesn't seem to be enough for Philip. So he tells Jesus, "Show us the Father, and that will be enough." In the daily news reports, every day we hear them speak about supplies of food, of PPE, and concerns not only about the supply, but how this might be distributed. A similar topic emerged for the early church as depicted in today's first reading from the Acts of the Apostles. Their good start was beginning to flounder a little bit. The disciples' first attempt at communal living, where everything was sold and brought together for distribution, so that no one claimed anything or everything for themselves, was beginning to get a bit difficult. Just 2 chapters after that was declared, we have today's reading. The Hellenists, that is the Greek Christians, complaining because their widows aren't getting a fair distribution. They're not getting as much as the Jewish Christians, the Hebrew Christian widows. Maybe it was greed or racial prejudice on the part of the Jewish Hebrews. Maybe it was grabbing on the part of the Greek Christians. Maybe it was neglect on the point of the apostles. Maybe it was just a faulty method of distribution, good intentions that had run amok. Whatever it was, it wouldn't be the last time that the church would have to deal with the tension between ethnic groups, the haves and the have-nots. Ways of effectively meeting need, appropriate social services. It wouldn't be the last time the church would have to deal with the deeper issue of the fine balance between the word and the work, between the sacrament and the service. So the disciples moved to structure the ministry, to balance the role between the ministry of preaching and the ministry of compassion, to find a balance between soul work and servanthood. In order to do it, they chose Stephen and Philip and 5 others whom we never heard of before or never heard of since. The focus was on the ministry of food and the ministry of serving, the work of compassion. In doing so, they modeled a balance in ministry, the whole ministry of the whole church in proclaiming the gospel and in doing the gospel. The Acts of the Apostles points to a picture of the church very much in transition. The disciples, and now many friends, have moved from a frightened group in that upper room to openly and proudly proclaiming the new relationship between God and his people. Despite its difficulties, despite often struggling to find the next step, the church miraculously manages to move forward. The last few weeks here in Holy Family Parish have also been a time of transition too. Overnight, our focus moved from having you present here at our Masses to trying to offer nourishment by way of live streaming. Some of this nourishment was in our weekday, our Sunday, or our Easter liturgies. Some of our offerings were words of encouragement by members of staff and friends. Others still were busy in the giving bank, serving those in need physically. It seems that the different areas of service are still very much alive and well. The ministry of proclaiming the gospel and the ministry of doing the gospel. In these challenging times, our hope is that you are doing well, that in some way you are finding nourishment in this time of need. In the gospel today, Jesus knew his disciples were going to also be forced to do things differently. As he faced his imminent death in Jerusalem, he urges his disciples not to let their hearts be troubled. Despite his not being physically present with them, they would never be without the Lord. I do hope you feel the same, that the last 2 months have forced us to do things differently, despite not being able to be physically present here with us. We hope that you feel his presence in your heart, that the Scriptures and his word is both transformative and uplifting. Today, Jesus promises his disciples that he has gone before them to prepare a place for them in God's house. In recent weeks, we have realized the beauty of that promise. Jesus doesn't want to be distant from us. He wants us to be with him, indeed, in the Father's house. So today, when we may have been forced to be alone, maybe we've been forced to isolate ourselves, we can appreciate the gift of what it is to be present to others and for God to be present to us. Today we thank God that he has given us enough. For without faith our lives would be without purpose or hope. If the Easter season has anything to say to us, it is that Jesus has gone before us. He wants us to follow. We have the promise that Jesus has gone to prepare a place for us, and that there are many rooms in the Father's house, and one of those rooms has our name on it. As Jesus promises to make room for us in that house, we are called to make room for Jesus in our lives here and now. On this Mother's Sunday, we thank God for the love, the joy, the warmth, and the understanding mothers bring to our families and to our homes. We ask God's blessing on all mothers at this time, on all expectant mothers. We also remember mothers who have lost a son or daughter. And this day as well, we remember also the mothers who have gone to God, to the room prepared for them in his house. In this time of Easter, may our lives be constantly transformed by your message of